You know when you buy a new computer and like right out of the box, it is just lightning fast.
Oh, yeah. Like it runs flawlessly.
Right, exactly. But then over time, without you even realizing it, it downloads all these um, hidden background programs, software updates, bloatware, tracking cookies,
Right.
and suddenly your battery is just draining, the whole system is lagging, and you have absolutely no idea why.
Yeah, that is such a great way to put it because we actually operate on invisible scripts like that we never actively chose to install,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to money.
Oh, for sure.
Like we just absorb these programs from our parents, our schools, and, just our culture in general.
Yeah, which is exactly why today we are looking at how to hack that programming. We're drawing from the transcript of the Rich Dad Poor Dad audiobook, specifically sourced via a review on the YouTube channel Life Changing Books Review.
Which is a fantastic breakdown, by the way.
It really is. And the source text breaks down what the wealthy teach their kids about money, that the poor and the middle class just, well, they do not. Okay, let's unpack this. The entire philosophy rests on this really fascinating ideological contrast.
Right, the two dads.
Exactly. The author's experience growing up with two highly influential father figures who just had radically different views on the world.
And the juxtaposition is brilliant because it really isolates the variable of financial mindset. Like you have the poor dad, who was actually the author's biological father, and he was incredibly highly educated. I mean, he had a PhD, he attended Stanford, Chicago, Northwestern, and held this really prominent government position.
Wow, so a totally impressive resume.
Oh, completely.
Yeah.
Yet he was just constantly struggling with bills. And then on the flip side, you have a rich dad, who was his best friend's father. This guy was an 8th grade dropout, but ultimately became one of the wealthiest men in Hawaii.
Right, and it's not like one was lazy and the other wasn't. Both men believed in hard work, right?
Oh, I'd say.
And both believed in education. But their core philosophies just clashed completely. Like the highly educated dad believed that the love of money is the root of all evil, but the rich dad believed that the lack of money is the root of all evil.
Yeah, that slight shift makes a huge difference.
It is wild how just shifting the language forces the brain into a completely different gear. Like the biological father had a habit of saying, I can't afford it.
Right, which we've all said.
Exactly. But the rich dad strictly forbade those words. He insisted instead on the question, how can I afford it?
And I mean, the mechanism there is just pure psychology. I can't afford it is a declarative statement, right?
Yeah.
It closes the door.
It really does.
It basically lets your brain off the hook because the decision is just finalized. But asking, how can I afford it, demands an answer. It forces the brain to boot up and, search for creative solutions or maybe new income streams or just different investment angles.
Yeah, it's like, well, think of the brain as a muscle. The highly educated dad basically put his financial brain on the couch to watch TV. The moment he said, I can't afford it, the workout was over.
Oh, I like that.
Right. But the rich dad took his financial brain to the mental gym every single day. He exercised it constantly because he operated on the belief that a stronger brain directly correlated to creating more wealth.
What's fascinating here is how clearly this illustrates that our thoughts literally shape our material reality. I mean, the author realizes very early on that his poor dad was not poor because of the size of his paycheck.
Because he actually made a good salary, right?
Yeah, he made quite a good salary. He was struggling because of his thoughts and his actions. He was actively writing the code for his own financial struggles.
So to rewrite that code, the 9-year-old author decides to learn from his rich dad. And this is where the source text moves from just this abstract mindset stuff into the actual physical traps that money sets for us.
The literal traps, yeah.
Right. So the author and his friend Mike want to, quote unquote, make money because they feel left out by the wealthier kids at school. And they take that phrase quite literally.
Oh my gosh, the toothpaste tubes?
Yes. They go around the neighborhood collecting all these empty lead toothpaste tubes, and they melt them down in a pot over a barbecue grill and try to cast them in plaster molds to forge counterfeit nickels.
I mean, it's highly illegal but incredibly creative first attempt at manufacturing wealth, you have to admit.
Truly.
So the poor dad has to, gently explain that counterfeiting is a federal crime. But he suggests they go ask the rich dad how money actually works in the real world. And that introduces the boys to what the text calls the rat race.
Right, because the rich dad puts them to work.
He does. He puts them to work dusting canned goods in his convenience store for 10 cents an hour.
Which, I mean, is excruciating work for a 9-year-old, especially because it was for 3 hours every single Saturday.
Yeah, that's rough.
So after 3 weeks, the author just reaches his breaking point. He marches into the rich dad's office, fully prepared to demand a raise to 25 cents an hour or he's going to quit.
Right.
Which is funny because he's doing exactly what his educated father advised him to do, right? Demand what you were worth.
Exactly. And the rich dad uses that exact moment of frustration to explain how the system actually traps people.
How so?
Well, he points out that demanding a raise or quitting to find a better paying job is the default reaction of almost every employee on Earth. But it never solves the underlying problem because people are caught in this cycle driven by two primary emotions, fear and greed.
Right. So the fear of not having money forces you to wake up and go to work.
Yeah.
You get the paycheck and then greed or desire kicks in. You start thinking about all the things that money can buy. You spend it, the fear returns, and you go back to work.
It's the donkey chasing a carrot dangling from a stick.
Yes. The owner of the donkey is getting exactly where they want to go, but the donkey is just chasing a total illusion.
And to shatter that illusion, the rich dad implements a pretty drastic lesson. He takes away the 10 cents an hour entirely.
Oh, man.
He tells the boys to go back to work dusting cans, but this time for free.
Wait, I have to push back on this. He has 9-year-olds working in his store for zero pay. I mean, for a guy who owns multiple businesses, that just sounds like straight up exploitation under the guise of a life lesson.
And that's totally fair. Actually, the biological father had the exact same reaction. He wanted to call the labor department.
I would too.
But let's look at the mechanism of the lesson itself. If the boys had demanded that 25-cent raise and actually received it, their brains would have been satisfied by the paycheck. The wage basically acts as a narcotic.
Wow, a narcotic.
Yeah. By taking the money away entirely, the rich dad forced them to detach their emotions for the concept of a wage. And without the distraction of a paycheck, their eyes finally opened to opportunities that were literally sitting in front of them the entire time.
Which leads to the comic books. They noticed the store manager throwing away the bottom halves of unsold comic books. So they negotiate with the distributor to keep them, and they haul them all into Mike's basement to start a comic book library.
They step out of the employee mindset entirely, and they create a system.
Right. They charge the neighborhood kids 10 cents admission to read as many comics as they want in 2 hours. And to manage it, they hire Mike's sister to act as the librarian.
Which is brilliant delegation.
It really is. They were generating $9.50 a week in the 1950s, which was massive money for a kid. And they didn't even have to be physically present.
No, they didn't.
They broke the emotional trap. But keeping that wealth requires the actual mathematics of money, which leads into the foundational rule of the source text, keeping it super simple by separating assets from liabilities.
Right, the core math.
Yeah, and since anyone listening to this deep dive likely already knows that an asset puts money into your pocket and a liability takes it out, we don't really need to labor over the definitions. The really interesting part is how highly educated people constantly confuse the two.
Oh, absolutely. And the most controversial stance in the text revolves around home ownership.
Oh, yeah.
Because traditional financial advice always dictates that buying a bigger, better house is your ultimate investment. But the text argues that for the middle class, a house is often their largest liability.
So what does this all mean? The middle-class approach to money is basically like trying to outrun a treadmill that speeds up every time you get a raise.
Right.
You earn more money, so you buy a bigger house, but that bigger house requires higher mortgage payments, higher property taxes, more expensive maintenance, and pricier insurance.
Yep.
So the raise didn't create wealth, it just accelerated the treadmill, trapping couples in this crazy cycle of debt. The wealthy approach isn't running faster on the treadmill, it's owning the gym.
I love that analogy, and this completely redefines wealth. The author pulls a concept from the inventor Buckminster Fuller, who argued that wealth is not your net worth.
Really?
Yeah, because net worth is often artificially inflated with depreciating items like cars or, consumer goods. He said wealth is survivability.
Oh, survivability in terms of time, not just a dollar amount.
Exactly the distinction.
Right.
If you stopped working today, how many days forward could you survive on the cash flow generated strictly by your assets?
Right.
If your asset column generates $2,000 a month,
Yeah.
and your living expenses are $2,000 a month, you are wealthy. You are entirely independent of a wage.
Wow.
And this mechanism explains why doctors, lawyers, and accountants frequently struggle financially despite massive salaries. They undergo decades of rigorous academic training, acquiring incredible professional skills, but zero financial skills.
Yeah, none at all.
They're essentially attempting to build the Empire State Building on a 6-inch concrete slab of financial illiteracy. The foundation simply can't hold the weight of their lifestyle.
So if an expensive degree is just a flimsy slab, what does pouring a deep, solid foundation actually look like? Because the author makes a massive distinction between your profession and your business. And I always just assumed the ultimate goal was to reach the top of your profession.
Well, Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's, provided the quintessential example of this distinction during a talk with an MBA class.
Oh, this is a great story.
It is. He asked the students, "What business am I in?" And naturally, they laughed and said he was in the hamburger business. But Kroc corrected them. He said, "I'm not in the hamburger business. My business is real estate."
Right, because the person buying the franchise is actually paying for the land under the physical restaurant.
Exactly.
So McDonald's is literally one of the largest real estate owners in the world.
Right. Your profession is what you do for a paycheck. You might be an engineer, a chef, or a mechanic. But your business is your asset column. The wealthy mind their own business by constantly acquiring true assets, income-generating real estate, stocks, bonds, royalties from patents.
And they avoid false assets.
Yes, like a brand new car that sheds a quarter of its value the absolute second the tires hit the street.
Speaking of cars, there is a fantastic story in the text about the author's wife, Kim, wanting a Mercedes.
Oh, I love this example.
Right. The instinct for most people is to either dip into savings or, finance the liability with a massive car loan. She did neither. She waited 4 years utilizing her capital to acquire an apartment building.
Yeah.
And once the cash flow from that apartment building was robust enough, the asset bought the car.
That's the secret.
The luxury was a reward for growing the asset column, not an anchor dragging them into a loan.
And to protect the cash flow those assets generate, the wealthy utilize entirely different societal rules, specifically regarding corporate structures and taxes.
Yeah, and we should point out, the text takes a highly objective look at the history of taxation, focusing on what the author calls the Robin Hood myth. Income taxes in England and the U.S. were initially sold to the public as a method for punishing the rich. The masses voted for it based on the idea of taking from the wealthy and subsidizing everyone else.
Exactly.
But according to the historical view in the text, the government's appetite for money naturally expanded, and the tax burden trickled down to heavily penalize the middle class, the very demographic that voted for it.
But the wealthy, however, did not just accept the penalty. They utilized their financial intelligence to maneuver through legal loopholes, primarily through the mechanism of the corporation.
Which changes everything.
It really does. The fundamental secret lies in how the math flows. As an everyday employee, the sequence is very rigid. You earn money, you pay taxes on those earnings immediately, and then you try to live on whatever's left over.
Yeah, the government takes its cut before you even see the check.
Exactly.
Mm.
But a corporation operates on a completely inverted sequence. The corporation earns money, it spends everything it legally can on pre-tax expenses, which can include vehicles, travel, or board meetings, and then it pays taxes only on whatever fraction of money is left over.
Hearing that laid out so plainly, it sounds like a rigged game. The everyday employee goes to work and gets penalized, while the corporation plays by a vastly more forgiving set of rules.
It does feel that way. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, that feeling of the system being rigged is exactly why the source material places so much emphasis on developing financial IQ.
Right.
Being angry at the tax system doesn't change your bank account. You have to understand the rules of the board game you are playing. And financial IQ is defined as the synergy of 4 distinct technical skills. It isn't just knowing one, it's how they interact.
Okay, so that's accounting, investing, markets, and the law, right?
Precisely. Accounting is basically financial literacy, the ability to read the numbers and evaluate the strength of a business.
Got it.
Investing is the science of making money. Understanding markets is grasping the mechanics of supply and demand. Like, is there an actual buyer for the asset you are acquiring?
Makes sense.
And the law is the protective shield. Knowing corporate law allows you to utilize tax advantages and protect your wealth from lawsuits. If you lack that legal knowledge, the world pushes you around. But if you possess it, you dictate the terms.
Well, here's where it gets really interesting. If the mathematical formula for getting rich is essentially 5th grade arithmetic, just putting assets over liabilities, Why isn't everyone doing it?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. The text points out that even when people acquire the financial literacy, they smash into massive psychological roadblocks. And the biggest one is the trap of specialization.
Yes. The author recounts this really telling interview with a brilliant, highly educated newspaper reporter in Singapore. She writes these beautiful, critically acclaimed novels, but they simply do not sell.
Ah, that's tough.
And when the author suggests she take a direct sales training course to learn how to market her books, she is deeply offended.
Of course.
She possesses a master's degree in English literature, and she completely refuses to stoop to the level of a quote-unquote salesperson.
She locked herself entirely out of success because of academic arrogance.
Exactly.
The author argues that most talented, struggling people are literally just one skill away from massive wealth. Like, if she combined her incredible writing ability with the mechanics of sales and marketing, she would likely be a best-selling author.
Without a doubt.
The text argues that over-specialization is a dangerous trap. You become entirely dependent on one specific industry, and unless you are protected by a powerful labor union, hyper-specialization leaves you highly vulnerable to market shifts.
Which is why the rich dad philosophy is to work to learn, not work for money. You want to know a little about a lot, synergizing skills rather than siloing them.
Right.
But even if you acquire the perfect combination of skills, you still have to confront the universal fear of losing money.
Oh, yeah. And the text recommends adopting a Texas mentality to overcome that fear. Texans win big, and when they lose, it is spectacular.
Grow big or go home. Right.
Exactly. They do not bury their failures. They get inspired by them. They took a catastrophic military defeat at the Alamo and turned it into a rallying cry that made them fiercely independent. Winners are inspired by failure. Losers are defeated by it.
And that fear often disguises itself as cynicism. The text refers to this as the chicken little mindset. You know, we all have that voice in our head screaming that the sky is falling. What if the economy crashes? What if the tenants destroy the property?
Right. People will say, I don't want to invest in real estate because I don't want to fix toilets at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
To which the author replies, I don't want to fix toilets either. That's why I factor property manager into the cash flow calculation.
Exactly.
The cynic basically lets their don't wants dictate their reality, and it blinds them to the mechanism that actually solves the problem.
And cynicism is frequently just a socially acceptable mask for laziness. I mean, the most common form of laziness today isn't sitting on a couch doing nothing, it's staying constantly busy.
Wait, staying busy is lazy?
Yeah, people stay obsessively busy at work or endlessly distracted by trivial tasks to avoid facing the reality of their financial stagnation.
Wow. Well, the prescribed cure for that laziness is a little bit of guilt-free greed. We are culturally conditioned to view greed as inherently evil, but asking yourself, what's in it for me? What would my life look like if I never had to work again? Taps into your spirit.
It does.
It provides the visceral motivation required to actually step off the treadmill.
Because you really need that emotional fuel to establish the final and undoubtedly the most difficult piece of the puzzle, overcoming bad habits through raw self-discipline.
Yeah.
And the golden habit of the wealthy, according to the text, is to pay yourself first.
Now, this sounds completely unhinged if you are struggling financially. Like, if you are short on cash and the bills are piling up, the text says you still allocate money into your asset column first before paying the electric company or the landlord. Logistically, how does someone manage the stress of creditors calling while they are funneling money into stocks or real estate?
Well, the friction is the entire point. If you pay everyone else first and yourself last, you feel zero pressure, but you also build zero wealth. By paying yourself first, you artificially engineer a crisis.
Oh, I see.
The looming pressure of unpaid creditors, the tax man, or a frustrated landlord forces your financial genius to wake up. The stress becomes the mechanism that motivates you to hustle, to invent a side income, or to negotiate a creative solution.
The pressure creates the diamond.
Exactly. Because the world is full of incredibly talented poor people who can cook a much better hamburger than McDonald's.
But McDonald's is rich because they mastered the business system around the hamburger.
Precisely. The true delineating factor isn't intellectual genius or sheer luck. It's the intense self-discipline to build and maintain that system.
Bringing this all back to you listening right now, breaking out of the rat race isn't about padding your resume to secure a slightly higher paying job just so you can buy a slightly bigger house.
No, definitely not.
That is just asking for a faster treadmill. Hacking your financial programming means fundamentally shifting your focus away from the income statement and pouring your energy into the asset column. You stop buying buckets with more holes in them, and you start building hoses that pump water in while you sleep.
And to put that into practice, I want to leave you with a thought to mull over. Returning to Buckminster Fuller's concept of survivability, I challenge you to calculate your own wealth number today.
Okay.
If your paycheck completely stopped tomorrow morning, how many days could you survive on the cash flow generated strictly by the assets you currently own? And I mean, not the money you get by liquidating your car or selling your house, but the actual recurring cash flow they produce.
It is a slightly terrifying question to ask yourself.
Oh, absolutely.
Honestly, though, it is also deeply liberating. Once you calculate that exact number, you see the reality of your current programming. You know exactly what background scripts you need to delete, and you can finally start coding a financial system that actually works for you. Take a hard look at your asset columns, start building those hoses, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.